Well, on BBC Radio 4, Simon Townley goes in search of the true origins of one of classical music's best-loved works and uncovers a mystery that's been dividing musicians for over 20 years as he asks, who wrote Bach's Toccata?
This is the story of a piece of music, a very familiar tune. Yes, that one. Toccata and Fugue in D minor by Johann Sebastian Bach. It's Bach's single most famous work. In fact, it's one of the best-known pieces in all music. But some say that almost everything we know about it is wrong.
You could say circumstantial evidence suggests it might be by Bach, but organists and Bach scholars have always questioned this piece.
Somebody said the piece was not by Bach, and not in D minor, and not a Toccata and Fugue, and not for the organ.
There is nothing specific about J.S. Bach about it, except that it happens to survive in a manuscript that someone copied down and the name of Bach appears there.
Just what is this piece? Because I don't know the answer. I wish I knew, you know, I wish I knew.
I'm Simon Townley. I'm a piano player by trade, although I have been known to play the organ in an emergency. But, like every other keyboard player I know, there's something about this tune that makes you want to feel it under your fingers. I've been bashing it out on the piano since I was a kid. I mean, it's the ultimate piece for show-offs, isn't it? You're the Phantom of the Opera. You can be the master of the keyboard. Or you can be a rock god. It all sounds so flashy, but in fact it sits very easily under the fingers. It's music that's been thrilling audiences for over 2 centuries, and thrilling musicians too, including organist Gillian Weir and violinist Andrew Manzi.
It's amazing, isn't it, that it's so well known that people will just say, can you play the toccata? So there were no other toccatas in the world. And while it's now well known to the point that one almost doesn't dare play it in a recital, nevertheless, I always get a thrill out of playing it because it's a magnificent piece of music.
Let's face it, it's equally well known to non-music specialists. What I mean is, people have seen Fantasia, they've heard this piece. Everyone knows this, even if they've actually never heard it before played through. They know that opening at least. And so, in a way, this is very common property that we all share this piece. However much or however little you know about Bach, you have an equal share in the ownership of this piece.
It's true, isn't it? And musicians of all shades have had a go at this work. From the piano virtuosos of the 19th century to jazz quartets and brass bands, not to mention Leopold Stokowski. Even a couple of heavy metal outfits have had a go. Thing is, everyone's been so busy enjoying the music, we've been turning a blind eye to the fact that we have no real proof this piece is by Bach at all. In fact, it's not even very much like anything else Bach wrote. Professor Peter Williams.
Of course, like every child learning the organ as a teenager, of course I wanted to play this piece too, because it's very exciting. Everybody knows it, everybody wants to play it, have terrific fun with it, pull out all the stops and bang away at it. Tremendous. It's only really writing about Bach, working in Bach scholarship and looking at sources, and from that beginning to question the musical language itself. Is this really this fellow? Why is it like nothing else in his work? It was that kind of question, I think.
Tell us about the source of this piece that we have, because we're looking here at this beautiful facsimile of the original manuscript of this piece. What's wrong with this?
Well, of course, it can't be the original manuscript because it clearly says it's a copy by somebody, Mr. Rink, Johannes Rink, Beyond that, it's only speculation. Did he copy it from a manuscript that said, this is the work of J.S. Bach, or was it even an autograph of J.S. Bach? Those two things seem unlikely because, in the first place, why is it that there aren't other copies? Bach used many copyists, some paid, some unpaid, students, but there's no other copy by any of those accredited copyists. Now, that's very suspicious. And Rink was not a pupil. He was a Berlin organist who may well have, for all we know, had access to Bach manuscripts, but that sounds so unlikely.
And then if you look at the music itself, there's lots of things about this piece that tell you say that it's not by Bach. What are the clues that say this isn't J.S. Bach?
Frankly, there are dozens, but let me just name two obvious and simple ones, is the very first note and the very last note. The very first note of the piece, that famous da-da-dum, is, as you can see, and as every organist knows, in octaves. Both hands play octave apart. What's special about that? Well, no other keyboard piece of Bach begins in octaves. And then my second point, the very last chord is odd. The problem is the chord at the end is a minor chord. The technical name for it is a minor plagal cadence. And minor plagal cadence, well, it's not against the law to write a minor plagal cadence, but show me another one. Before,
by Bach?
Well, anybody really before the late 18th century.
Right.
It was chiefly those 2 points that made me begin to think, wait a minute, this could be a string piece. That young Rink was making a transcription of a solo string piece. I think that's the most plausible explanation.
Well, let's suppose that the Toccata and Fugue did start life as a string piece for the violin or the cello. Then lots of little elements that seem anachronistic might suddenly make sense. For a start, those controversial opening octaves wouldn't be by Bach at all, but an invention of the arranger to make it work on the keyboard. And a string work of the time could easily have finished with an open chord, neither major nor minor. Again, the arranger would want to fill that out on the organ, creating that suspicious minor cadence. What's more, tunes like this crop up all the time in string writing. So, case closed? Andrew Manzi, who does perform this piece on the violin, is not so sure.
As a violinist, I'm perfectly happy to hear this piece on the organ, actually. It's the organists who are saying, look, this is uncharacteristic. So then you ask the question, if it isn't originally for organ, maybe what survives is an arrangement of a piece. So what instrument might it have been for? There's not a tradition of toccatas for violin. And this is where we get into difficult ground, that if it's for violin, it's a very unusual violin piece.
And, of course, the move from organ to violin completely changes the character of the music.
On the violin, it's a very different piece. You can't make an enormous noise. You can't shock people and overwhelm them. You have to do it more by suggestion and by contrast. You have to be overwhelming in another way. And in fact, I found that the most effective way to start this piece was to start it very softly. You say, I'm going to play Bach's Toccata, and people expect it to be loud. You defeat their expectation, and immediately they're with you in the sense of wondering what you're going to do next to this piece. I found that this piece transferred to the violin surprisingly easily. I started from a blank piece of paper and built up the piece until I felt I'd got as close to the piece without compromising the technical side. And I was amazed how easily it happened. Actually, just from a technical point of view, I found, as also Peter Williams and Jaap Schroeder found with their version, that taking it from the original D minor key up to A minor immediately fits the violin better. Once the fugal section starts, it just fits the violin so well to be in that key. Then you really start believing it's a violin piece because it fits the fingers uncannily well. But we mustn't be seduced by that. The fact that it works well on the violin is no proof.